hope you started. Hi, everyone. I'm Gal Almog. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Talenya. Very excited to have you here, and thank you for joining our webinar on ROI calculation for recruitment technologies. We have a very professional and experienced panel with us today. We're going to start by introducing our panelists, and I'll let each one introduce themselves. I'm actually talking to you from Tel Aviv, Israel. As you can see from my accent, I'm not a native of Brooklyn or somewhere else, but of Tel Aviv. So my apologies for my accent. But our panelists are true Americans, and you can speak your language, the language of HR and recruitment. We're all familiar with. So, Evelyn, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually Canadian, by the way. I guess I'll just point that out, but I do live in America. I'm Evelyn McMullen. I am the HCM Research Manager at Nucleus Research. To tell everyone a little bit about Nucleus, we are a technology analyst firm, but instead of focusing on the technology itself, we focus on the financial return that the use of the technology provides. So I've been with the firm for about 3 years now, and I started by covering talent. So it's got a special place in my heart.
Thank you. Fantastic. Trevor?
Yes, I'm Trevor White. I have the immense pleasure of working with Evelyn at Nucleus. I oversee our advisory services.
Great. Sandra?
I will go off mute. And I am also come from the land of Israel myself, Gal, but I have been in the United States for a very long time, but I like to call myself a dual citizen. But anyway, Sandra Myers, I'm an SVP leading the capital markets HR business partner at Raymond James, which is a middle market investment bank. Prior to that, I was at IBM for 5 years, leading a technical team that supported all the HR IT systems. And prior to that, I was at Goldman Sachs for 16 years doing recruiting as well as business partner roles, supporting the merchant banking division. So excited to be here.
Thank you. And thank you all for agreeing to participate in this webinar. This is a topic that is not discussed very often, ROI. When you're in the HR domain, it's all about filling, environment, all the soft things that we are aware of, managing and hiring people. But the topic here is focused on what makes sense for companies from a different perspective, but primarily the financial perspective of implementing tools, specifically recruitment technology. We know from research, and maybe Trevor and Evelyn, you can relate to that the majority of the tools purchased by companies in the HR area are never implemented or never implemented properly. I heard the number 84%. So that means we have an issue in implementing HR-related technologies. And one of the topics today is to find out why this is happening and how we can address and change that, perhaps. I'd like to start by, asking you, Trevor, you are advising companies on financial aspects of implementing talent and HR and recruitment technology. So tell me why companies hire you to do that.
Yeah, so we work with companies to help justify the purchases. I think for a lot of folks, HR is considered that necessary evil. And when they go to their CFO or to their buying committee, everybody kind of has the opinion that if people are getting paid on time, why should I spend, in some cases, a couple $1 million changing things? And we'll go in and help companies calculate the actual benefits and the associated cost with deploying a new solution so that they can go to their CFO, they can go to the buying committees and show that this is truly a capital investment in the business, the same way that you invest in anything else in your business. And so really changing the framework and the vocabulary around HR technology, it's not just this thing that's nice to have, it's actual necessary business investment.
Got it. And Evelyn, maybe you can relate to that. Who is hiring you? Is this the CFO, the VP of Talent Acquisition, HR? Who is the client?
Usually we would work with a VP of HR. Of course, what we give to the VP of HR, they then take to their CFO to be able to make the business case for the software. But I do want to underscore that while it's important to get buy-in from those people, so the VP of HR, CFO, I think the most important thing is to make sure that your end users are on board, because that's often the biggest obstacle to driving value from the system. Because if they're not using it, then what was the point?
Got it. And Sandra, can you relate to that? At your time at IBM, I'm sure you had many projects that you needed to bring up for approval by IT, by finance. Can you describe to us the process of that? Was that part of every project? Did you have to justify every project, or you had an authority to say, okay, this is something for us to make a decision on? You had any flexibility?
Yeah, we did have to justify every project. So the way we would approach certain things is really by business case perspective, right? And as you guys can imagine, from a business case, what is the top priority from a financial CFO is the ROI, and focus mostly on the hard cost benefits, right? So by being able to roll out XYZ tool, how much savings are we going to really get? And that is really where a lot of that focus was really the hard ROI. With that said, what we try to do is really think a bit, a little granular, a little outside the box, and say, okay, we've got the hard ROI, but then what are the things that are really critical to ensure that, one, we're focused on the right business process and looking for and focused on the right question, so we can get the right solution. And in addition to just what is the financial benefit that we get. So one of the things we did is kind of put an overall investment score around our business cases, or what we wanted to initiate. And of course, as you can imagine, about 40% of it was really weighted on the hard cost savings, which is the ROI. But then we really pushed the business to think about the soft benefits, which could potentially be efficiencies, right? Making people increase their performance, their productivity. And then in addition to that, priorities, right? What are the core values? What are the core focuses from an HR leadership perspective was another aspect of it. And then in addition was really end user experience, because that is, again, another big focus on being able to see the soft ROIs that we're tracking, like user adoption and productivity and engagement and so forth. So even though the hard cost ROI, which was really the financial aspect of it, definitely took the majority of the weighing from an investment score perspective. But we wanted to ensure that we were thinking a little bit broader than that and focus on the soft savings of how we're going to make our people more efficient, as well as the end user, and really what is the priority from a firm perspective as well as business leadership perspective.
Thanks. We'll come back to that, but I want to ask Evelyn to give us an idea about the parameters that you are using in evaluating specifically recruitment tools. When you come in, what KPIs do you put typically in place, and how do you measure them?
Yeah, so of course, the main benefit that you would think of when you think of talent acquisition software, specifically when you're automating something, is going to be recruiter time savings. So we break that down, very granularly, saying how many recruiters do you have, how many hours per week were they saving, and then I think we have a slide on this, Trevor, but maybe it's not worth pulling it up now. But we will take that and multiply it by a correction factor, because of course, there's an inefficient transfer of time. And just because, just because you are giving someone back maybe an hour doesn't mean they're using that entire hour, putting it back into work. So you would take the salary, the 75% savings, and you would be able to kind of give yourself a hard number for that specific benefit. Of course, I said an hour before, didn't realize our graphics is 20 minutes, but another thing that people don't think about as much are metrics like time to fill, which I think are really important, because if you think about it, if a position is open, there's a need to be filled, there's a lost productivity there. So that one, you can think of it in terms of, just to give you an example, you have a retailer that has about 10,000 employees. Hypothetically, if they were at 100% turnover, minimum wage, it would be about $8.4 million in annual loss. So of course, it's kind of an extreme example and hypothetical, but just gives you an idea of, the importance of filling roles quickly.
Got it. And you bring it, and Trevor, do the company often have that kind of information available, or part of the process is to really figure out the real numbers?
Yeah, so part of the process is really taking folks down from, I know I've got a problem, to those numbers that you just saw on the slide. So I always say, in the simplest form, you have headaches, right? There's a reason why you're looking for a new solution. So just start there. Identify, what is this one headache that I have? What is this one problem that every day I'm frustrated with, and just work down from there to figure out how much time you're actually spending on these tasks. Where are there inefficiencies? How is the solution that you're looking or potentially looking to purchase going to address those needs? And once you've done that for one of your benefits, go back to your second thing. Okay, what's another thing that gives me a headache? Where do I know I have inefficiencies? What are, my team that work for me, what are they doing and calling me about? What are their complaints? So it can seem like an astronomical task at the very beginning, particularly from folks who maybe don't have a finance background, obviously not atypical in HR. And it can seem quite intimidating when we're saying, oh, okay, let's prepare benefits to go bring to a CFO, to go bring to a team of accountants, right? But if you really break it down by individual task and individual lines, like you just saw, you can make it a lot more approachable for yourself, and then you can feel a lot more confident when you're going in and you're trying to justify this decision. So it's no longer, I think, or I feel, or we could really use. It's going in and speaking the language of a CFO, which is money.
Right. And is it typically, we want to do this project, help us justify it? Or we're exploring the opportunity?
It's a bit of both. I always say that when it comes to HR, it's a 2-time sales for the vendor. So first, you've got to convince the HR team that this is a product that they can use that's going to address their issues. And then you've got to, again, convince finance that HR isn't just a necessary evil. It's a core part of business. And I'll say, if there was one, not good thing, but if there's one change from the pandemic, I think companies have started to realize the value that their HR department has, the value that their people have, and starting to take those requests for investment a little bit more seriously.
And Trevor, let me add to that a little bit from an HR kind of side of things. I think the pandemic, I completely agree with you that I think the pandemic has definitely changed the views of how HR is looked at, especially given that we had to very much partner closely with our legal regulations, IT, once the pandemic hit and everybody was sent to go home. And I think that really showed the value that we bring to the table and the partnership relationships that we have across the organization. And in addition to that, I think what the pandemic has also proven is that they want more efficiencies, more automations, more ways to be able to use technology to do what they need to do. And that technology is really leading the way in the way we want to work in the future, whether it's recruiting, whether it's retaining, whether it's onboarding, whether it's just doing a day-to-day job and being able to be successful in doing that. So I think user experience, efficiencies, automation is something that a lot of companies are focused on and looking forward to in the future, and looking to infuse a lot more of that into their technologies.
Thank you, Sandra. And maybe you can describe to us the process of getting projects approved, because I'm sure that every year you had more project than you had budget. What was the process like, and how were you prioritizing that?
Sure. So, one of the things we really did, strategically work together with our business. So again, I was on really more on the IT side, working closely with HR, my stakeholders and clients. Gal, as you said, right, every year you've got some sort of a budget. Typically, it goes down, not up. And our job is to ensure that we are bringing forward the initiatives and projects that we really believe are core values to the organization that we work in, and really can drive the strategy that they're looking for. So what the, and if you start kind of asking a lot of people a lot of questions of what you want to do, everybody's going to say, I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do X, Y, and Z. And the reality is we can't do it all. So one of the things we've done is kind of put some sort of an investment score, as I referenced earlier today, on the specific business processes that we wanted to influence and actually roll out. And 40% or so was very much focused on the hard cost savings, so the financial aspect. But then we really broke it down on other stuff, like I said, soft cost savings, which is really about efficiencies. What is leadership focus and the company's focus from a strategy perspective? And then we actually took an additional kind of layer to it and said, what is really required? And when I say required, meaning from a legal, compliance, mandatory perspective, because as we know, legal regulations and rules continue to change, and especially the pandemic has, added a lot more in certain states and countries. So that was kind of the first track that we did as we compiled all the requests of what we want to focus on. There was about 20 to 30 of them, but the reality is we can't do it all. So once we then put that investment score on top of these initiatives, 20 to 30, we then came down to a list of about 10 to 15 that we said, those are critical. And they're critical from the perspective of, feeding into the core values of the organization, the strategic strategies and initiatives that we want to focus on. And then what we also did is even layered it even more and broke it into 3 different categories. And we looked what is legally required, as I said, because we had to do it or the company we worked in would get sued and have to pay a lot of money, which again is not something the CFO wants to do. And then we also added modernize and strategic. So what do I think about modernize is investment to align to the core values, to the strategic directions of the organization. And then modernize is really creating kind of the operational efficiencies and doing that. And that will also align to kind of the revenue growth via consolidations, consistencies, right? And streamlined processes. Now, as you can imagine, our required and mandatory bucket was much larger than anything else. And the reality is, whatever budget we had to tackle those because then it would cost a lot more for the organizations that we supported. But one of the things that we really try to push our business and our CFO on is if we continue to just focus on the required and mandatory, we are never going to get out of that bucket and never be able to really move the needle from a modernization or strategic perspective. So, because if you continue to just look at your required, every year you're just going to have more required because you've got legacy applications, you've got different regulations, so you have to constantly just change what you need to do. So we really wanted to ensure if we really want to get to that next level and really be a modernized strategic organization, we've got to focus on that. And we got to focus on those initiatives and those technologies to support those initiatives. So thankfully, we were able to get our CFO aligned to it. And the way we were able to do that is that we were one united front, meaning IT and HR, which is the business I supported, went in front of the CFO and said, this is what's strategic. It's strategic to the firm, it's strategic to our business, and this is the right tooling around it to make sure that we have the efficiency that we want, the automations that we need, you will then see the hard cost ROI that you're looking for. It may not be in year 1 or in year 2, but our business case is really fed into a 5-year program and business process. And first year is a lot more investment. By the second year, that investment goes down and you really start seeing the value from a financial perspective in year 3, 4, and 5. So
Right.
high level, hopefully that answered your question.
If I could just jump in real quick too, I think Sandra makes an excellent point. Using your business case to identify where your value drivers are going to be, and using that to focus where your internal energies are going to be put. So Evelyn obviously mentioned before the biggest issue that we have in deployment sometimes is lack of adoption, or certain other benefits that we predicted kind of fall off. And so when you take your business case, you cannot just use it to justify purchase, but use it as a roadmap for your continued implementation. So if I know that, these three things are driving 80, 90% of my benefits, well, I better focus a lot of my internal energy making sure that those things happen, right? Whether it's end user adoption, whether it's making sure I offboard a legacy solution, whatever it is. Whereas, I might have other benefits that save a couple grand and that might be nice for PR or whatever, but they're not really going to drive the actual business case. Those I can probably worry a little bit less about, because just like we don't have unlimited money, I'm sure all of you are short-staffed, don't have unlimited time either. So using the business case to identify where it makes sense to put my money as far as investing in software, and then where does it make sense within that investment to be putting my time and my effort to make sure that I'm achieving the outcomes that I expect.
Yeah, and actually back to Trevor and Evelyn, what you guys said in the beginning, it is very much start with the change management, right? And Gal, it goes back to the point that you made about 84%. I believe that was the number you used, of systems don't get really rolled out. And I think part of that is because you're starting with trying to bring in a system to solution something, but you don't have the buy-in that this is a place we want to invest in, and that we want to transform, and that we want to change. So it's got to start from there, getting alignment of what do we want to change, what is not working, where is that change management going to be. And once you have the buy-in that change management is needed and is required, make us more efficient and bring whatever value whatever KPI we're focused on, then you're able to then ensure that you're bringing in the right technology partners and solutions to the table, and build that business case around the fact that they know that change management is needed specifically in that area.
Got it. Thank you. Evelyn, maybe we can relate to that topic from your perspective. You come in, they give you a project or maybe a couple of projects to analyze for ROI. And do you come back to monitor the success over time? Is this typically a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year project? Or you just come in, you make an analysis, make a recommendation, and you're gone? Is this a longer project where you stay in the picture to see actually results and make sure that the company meets their goals?
Well, it's actually a good idea, but and Trevor can probably speak to the selection process, but I usually come in to do a case study once a software has been deployed for at least a year. So I can kind of see, where the benefits are when I talk to the contact of the customer. So Trevor's the one who kind of helps.
Evelyn does the back end, I do the front end.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so you do the analysis post-implementation, Evelyn.
Yes, I do. And that is quantified over a 3-year period. So usually, ideally, I go in after year 1, and then we use those costs for the 3-year period to kind of give an annualized ROI.
Okay, so, tell us about that kind of experience, because there are hopes, excitement, and then implementation. First of all, in your experience, do companies end up implementing successfully those recruitment technology or not?
In my opinion, from what I have seen, I've been lucky in getting a lot of great success stories. However, of course, seeing everything in the media and talking to other people that maybe I haven't done a case study on, that's not always the case. And just tying it back, it really does always come down to lack of adoption. So we have a section in all of our case studies called Lessons Learned, where someone either shares best practices of the deployment, or they talked about what they would have done differently. And I find a lot of the time, either it's, we did a really good job in demonstrating value to the end user, or I wish we had spent more time doing that. So that's usually where it falls off, like we said earlier. But just
But,
keeping with that theme.
not all of your projects have been successful and just meeting their KPI, have there?
No, and sometimes something that they thought they were probably going to do really well in, they didn't. But it kind of made up in another area, hence the ROI not always being, horrible. Like I said, I'm lucky to have had the experience of doing case studies in talent acquisition that were relatively successful.
But maybe it's because Trevor did a good job setting up those KPIs.
That could be it. I know, exactly.
Well, what do you
Maybe
think?
that's why.
Yeah, I would say, and I think probably the theme that all three of us have touched on today is that at the end of the day, it's really about adoption. When we do see failures, frankly, not just in the talent space, but across the all SaaS solutions, it's a lack of adoption. Bad processes in a new software are still going to give you bad results, right? Just with an expensive price tag and a nice Deloitte consulting bill to come with it at the end. So really focusing on making sure that folks are using what you're paying for. Otherwise, why are you paying for it in the first place? And so the number of times where we do see failures, it's almost always because of a lack of adoption. There's a automation service available, or a self-service, or some other way to increase productivity or reduce cost, and folks just don't take advantage of it because they don't want to bother learning how to do it, or they've been doing it the same way for 20 years. I'm sure everybody knows in their HR department that one solution that has been on green screen and 2 people know how to use it, and when they retire, you're going to have to buy something new because who else can run it? But if you're going to put the investment in, you've got to make sure you're putting in the effort in, because if you don't have that adoption at the end, you're not going to see the results. And so a lot of times it can sound like a great idea to the CHRO or someone else high up in the organization, but if they're not getting their folks on the front line to use it, it's not going to see the results that you've looked for. And so that's something that we always try and drive home on our consultations, and something I think that really is kind of the key takeaway from any type of technology investment, but particularly something like HR that is so people focused.
And Trevor,
that's your experience as well, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm completely aligned to what you said. I've been in situations and seen situations where, because there was not thoughtfulness around changing a business process and just putting a nice little shiny tool over a bad business process, you will never going to get what you want out of it from an ROI, hard saving, soft saving, adaptability, user experience, anything. And I've seen that happen a lot where they lift and shift a bad business process into a nice little nice shiny tool, and they think that is going to increase the adoption. But if anything, it actually decreases it, because again, the tool that may have selected that might look prettier may not actually be able to accommodate an old process. So for you to be able to ensure that you are getting everything you want from that investment, whether it's financial, whether it's productivity, enablement, adoption, you got to start with a business process, taking a step back, evaluating it from an end-to-end perspective, and saying, what do I want it to look like? And then if you have that clarity, then it's much easier for you to be able to get the investment that you from a tooling perspective and the adaptation that you want. Because again, you've rethought the process, you've got the buy-in, which goes with change management, and then you do put the right tool around the right business process, and the adoption of it is not even going to be a question because people are going to want to use it. What I've said to you, Gal, in the past, and I'm sure Trevor and Evelyn will agree with me, is no one came to our house and taught us how to use Facebook or LinkedIn, right? So the reality is, from a tool perspective, we want to ensure that we have that same end user experience. But again, the foundation of it and the core is about the business process. And that is where, from an HR perspective, is where we need to be focused on.
Got it.
I was going to say, I always use the example Amazon, right? In
Yeah.
theory, a fairly complex idea, right? You're going and searching on the web for some random object that you're then going to order and have delivered to your house, but intuitive, right? And so
Yeah.
it should be the same thing when I'm searching for candidates. Same idea. I should be able to just go in and figure out how to do it. It shouldn't require a ton of training. It shouldn't require this heavy lift as far as adoption. And the easier it is to adopt, the more likely folks are going to take advantage of it.
Exactly.
So there's interesting because on the one hand, you can have proven ROI, which you do yourself, you bring the experts like Evelyn and Trevor to do for you, and you prove positive ROI, you prove saving, and then the reality hits when that solution is not being implemented because of poor adoption, and all the ROI go down the drain. So Sandra, what do you do in order to ensure a good adoption? I know from my experience, we sell sourcing automation software that is supposed to automate a lot of labor-intensive work of recruiter. It makes sense. It makes sense to the VP. And then recruiters don't want to change. By the way, LinkedIn is not something that you use without training, at least on the source, at least on the sourcing side. Okay?
I don't source from there.
Okay, so it's a poor tool to source, and you really need expertise. But users don't want to change, even if you bring them the best technologies and you prove to them it would save time. You cannot really force them to do something. And when you do trials with products, they oftentimes push back. How were you able to overcome that?
Again, I think it goes down to pushing them on them looking at their actual business process, right? And thinking about what is the outcome that they're looking for? What are the pain points right now? Like, for example, is what you said, time to fill, right? Time to fill a role or time to source. What is that process now? And then what could we do, taking a tool outside of the equation for a second, and what can we do to ensure that we are increasing it, decreasing it, whatever you're looking for, kind of what are the KPIs or metrics that we want to focus on? And that really goes down to the business process. So if, and you're right, Gal, people are afraid to change, no matter in what they do in their life. This is how I did it. I'm going to continue to do it. If it ain't broken, I'm not going to fix it. Right. But the reality is, where we are today and where we're going to continue to go is we've got to have a growth mindset. We got to be thinking outside the box. We want to be more efficient. We want to ensure that people are focused on doing their day-to-day job and not kind of wasting their time on manual work or workarounds because the tooling around whatever process we have is not allowing us to be as efficient as we want. So for me, what in my experience, it's really been about asking the why and finding out, again, what does that business process looks like? And once having that finalization of the business process, then you'll be able to get the change management, because then you could show the value of having a good business process around it. And then once you get that, whatever, then really the tool aspect of it is really kind of the easy part of it, right? Because again, you've got your business on board in knowing this is critical, knowing that we needed to change the process, or being open to the change management and having that growth mindset, and then really, going and figuring out what is that right tool around what we're thinking is the new process.
Got it. Thank you. And Evelyn, having spent time on reviewing project already implemented, what do you advise companies as far as adoption, which I think is key? And if it's missing, then the best products are unlikely to fail.
Yeah, I'm thinking of one case study in particular where the executives were really pushing, for the use of this specific product. And I think it goes to show just how important it is to really go into a deployment as a unified front as a company, kind of demonstrating the value for everybody involved. Other smaller things I've seen are, of course, gamification, like, always good to persuade people to use things by creating a little bit of friendly competition. But no, I would say the most important thing is making sure that everyone involved in the project, regardless of if they are using it, day to day, are, demonstrating its value and are just involved in the process.
Evelyn, I have a question for you. Given
Sure.
the fact that you go in a year into something being rolled out, what are the top things that you've seen where it failed, and why did it fail?
Yeah, well, of course, it's the lack of adoption, and that's usually when some people are using it, but it's the turnout is not as high as was expected. I think sometimes there's poor planning. There's not enough time dedicated to really making sure that it's rolled out correctly. And I would say, off of the adoption front, just not making the end users aware. So, not doing enough work in terms of communications campaigns, or, they're not holding company wide meetings where they're letting it be known that something's actually being deployed and they're actually going to have to use it.
And going back to your adoption and lack of adoption, is it due to more from a marketing perspective and not really doing a good job in saying, here's a new tool, a new way? Or do you find it that it's more because they're just lifting and shifting a process that really was not, great to begin with, and just putting it on somewhere else?
I think it's lifting and shifting. I think it's more so a lack of education. I think we're still kind of in an era where, especially in HR, automation is a dirty word. So I think, you've got some users that are thinking, okay, set it and forget it. I don't actually have to do anything because the system's going to do it for me. So they don't actually
Hmm.
end up using it. But on the other side, you have people that have been doing the same thing, and they could have been doing it well for a very long time. If it isn't broken, don't fix it, and they are afraid that a certain degree of automation is going to make them lose their job. And of course, while not directly correlated, we're seeing all these layoffs take place recently, and of course it's going to instill some sort of fear. And that's not something that I've seen in my case studies recently because they've been so recent, but I think it's just an overarching theme.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Trevor, when you come in to do the analysis, is it typically for one tool, or you look at multiple tools and compare ROI? How's that been done?
Yeah, so it really depends. The problem when you're comparing multiple tools is that a lot of the benefits are going to be the same. So if I'm doing a completely manual recruiting-based task, right, and I start looking at different recruiting solutions, they're all going to automate some part of the task. So I think when you are comparing multiple tools, what's really important is comparing the differences between those tools. So are there certain benefits that I can get from deploying, tool A versus tool B? Is tool A faster to train on? Are folks going to be more comfortable with tool B? Things that are going to drive adoption. So when you're comparing two tools head to head, it can be a little bit unnecessary to do kind of a full ROI build out. Right when you're at that point, you really just want to compare the differences. So you can look at, okay, what's the cost going to be? What are the drivers? Are there any differentiators and benefits that I can separate? And then once you've identified that individual tool, then it makes more sense to go in and calculate the entirety of the cost of the deployment, the entirety of the benefits.
Got it. Thank you.
Trevor, I'm sorry, Gal. The other two kind of points that we looked at when we looked at tools was API capabilities, and how that can integrate into our systems that we have. And some companies have a lot of legacy, as you can imagine. Some are much more modern. And then the other aspect of it was also how configurable can they be? Especially when you're thinking about a SaaS, right? Because a SaaS product has hopefully multiple companies that use it, and it's not as easy as you have a homegrown tool that you can customize to whatever you want for that company. But are those other two things that you get questioned a lot, and is something that companies think about as they're evaluating different tools?
Yeah, and I think the APIs in particular are a really good point, because that's obviously going to affect the ability of your systems to function. So we will see when we're comparing tools, head to head, talking to the IT departments, which is not something we admittedly usually do, right? because we're kind of less worried about that, but making sure that these benefits that we've discussed or that we're identifying are things that we can actually achieve. So can I pull the necessary data? Can I connect it into this, next step in the process so that it is truly automating it? So making sure that the benefits that you're looking at are actually capable within your organization as a whole, not just in the kind of vacuum that is a demo or an RFP process. An excellent point, Sandra.
Thank you. Sandra, I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we're going to turn to the audience for questions. I know you've had horror stories with implementing HR. Maybe you've inherited some systems that were purchased based on the wrong ROI, I would say, maybe cost, but not efficiencies. So I can only assume that getting your project through has a lot to do with the way they're being evaluated, and also the politics around that. Can you give us some color on the process? Do you need to be a politician to be successful in your HR role?
You need to be a politician to be successful in the world, in my opinion. But yes, there's definitely a lot, because everybody has a different focus and value or thought of what they think value is and what they want to see from a business process or a tool. So you definitely have to ensure that you know the audience you're talking about, and ensure that you're focusing on those specific KPIs or points that that they're going to want to hear. So if I go in front of the CFO, what are they focused on? They're focused on the financials. So they're focusing on, how much money can I save? How much headcount can I potentially reduce? What are the legacy applications that I can actually, get rid of? And will that cost me savings? If I go to the IT department, it's saying, well, look, if I bring this tool on, I can then sunset about 10 to 15 tools. That's going to create more efficiencies. Everything is in one space. We can get rid of the legacy, which are kind of the dead bodies that are going end of life, and we're not going to be in a situation. If I go to HR, who are kind of focused on the actual business process, there it's more showing to them the value of the streamline, the efficiencies, and end user perspective, going into one place to do multiple things versus going to multiple different places to do one thing. So it really all depends, I think, who you're talking to. But when we are going forward to get the buy-in for the investment, it's all of those 3 or 4 or 5 people that you are actually presenting this to. So you got to ensure that you're focused on the business value, the end user experience, and then of course the financial aspect of what that would be like, if we go and roll this out. And again, the one thing we also focus on is you're not going to see the value on year 1 or year 2. Hopefully by year 3, because again, unless you are a complete startup and you're starting from ground zero, there is a lot of legacy out there. There's a lot of integrations. There's a lot of configurations. Every firm is very different. So, and there's a lot of overlap, right? You roll a new tool. It doesn't mean that you could just shut the old tool down right away. There's got to be some sort of a overlap of being able to kind of slowly get off the old tool, integrate the new tool. And then again, it goes to the adoption of ensuring that you've got the right training, you've got the right branding, you've got the right marketing. So this way you could shut the old tool down. I found in my experience when we rolled something new, it took us at least a year before we were really able to formally shut the old tool down and really kind of stop talking about it. Because the other big part is also the retention of the data and the historical information that we also need to be thinking about as we're thinking about rolling out something new. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you. We're going to turn now to the audience, perhaps see if there are any questions to our panel. Raise your hand. There's a QA section where you can ask questions. One of the questions is how HR and talent acquisition people can better sell to CFO. What do they need to understand to be able to make a better argument with financial people? Sandra, do you want to relate to that?
Sure. Yeah, I can relate to that a little bit because I kind of recently just went through that. And again, I think this goes back to really being able to show the value and the investment that really aligns to the overall core strategy of the firm. Because even though the CFOs are focused on the finance, I'm hoping they also are focused on the firm them specifically, and again, where we are today and where we want to go. So I think part of the HR and TA team is to say, we know where XY company wants to be in 3-5 years from now. We understand what their mission and vision, what the strategy is, and this will be able to accelerate or aid or adapt to that new strategy. So being able to link the core value of an organization to that tool, because that will drive the strategy that they're looking for. And again, also being able to say, you're not going to see that value on day 1 or 2, but you will see it on year 3, and that will continue to align to the overall long-term strategy that we want. So that is how we were able to really get the funding that we needed. And again, it really needs to be a united front. So where it worked for us is being able to bring IT and the business together as one united front, having the exact same mission, goal, and strategy in front of the CFO to show we're aligned to the firm, to the business, and to technology of it.
Thank you. I think we're gonna end at this point. I think we've covered a lot. My takeaways are that if you define KPIs for positive ROI upfront, you are more likely to be successful at the back end. That adoption is a key to successful implementation of positive ROI on projects. That finding ways to prioritize your project and scoring them in a smart way for financial people to evaluate is key, and aligning all the stakeholders to support it is also key. And also don't expect everything to be implemented and successful in 1 year. If you plan for a couple of years, and that would increase your chances to be successful. Did I miss anything important?
No, I think you hit it all. You got it.
Good. Adoption.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right,
sure.
folks. Thank you so much. You've been great. And I learned a lot. I hope our audience learned as well. And I want to thank you and wish you a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Gal.
Thanks,
Thank you for the
everyone.
opportunity.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Very much. Bye.